Hello, how's everyone doing? As Pete mentioned, I'm a protocol developer for Bitcoin ABC, which is it's the most used client that's for Bitcoin Cash. So protocol development's a pretty different world than the mining space. So I'm going to in my talk, I'll try to kind of give a bit of insight into that world and also draw out things that I think are of interest to mining. So hopefully that works for you guys. And I'm going to use this event of the hash war to tell a story and draw out some lessons from that. So Bitcoin's an interesting thing because it's not just a technology. Like, I'm more on the technology side, I guess, but it's the fusion of technology and economics. So if you think about mining from the perspective of the protocol, like if you think of why do we even have mining? What's the purpose of it? You know, maybe it's to make money or something. That's a good reason for you guys to want to mine. But if you think about it from the side of like a cryptocurrency, it's basically an economic incentive that secures the network and makes it expensive for people to tamper with the records in the blockchain. So that's kind of a theoretical idea that everyone has, and that's how it works, but it's not often tested in practice. So this event that happened in November last year, that people call the hash war, is something that kind of tested out this theory, and we can use that to see what actually happens in the real world. So it kind of gives us an idea of how this theory plays out in practice. Okay, I'll see if I can figure out my slides here. Okay, so today I'll just start out by giving a quick kind of overview to motivate what I'm talking about, of what actually happened. Then I'll go into a bit of the background that led up to it to explain the context of everything that happened. And then I'll just talk about what actually happened in the hash war and some lessons that I think may be relevant to miners. So just to kind of motivate what I'm talking about. So before November, this is just a snapshot from the bitcoincash.org website back in maybe a month or two, like in October or something. It has that system has undergone, they do periodic network upgrades. So according to this, you think, okay, everyone's preparing for this upgrade. But then when it actually happened, it wasn't just a normal upgrade. It was a pretty crazy event. So just to explain what's on this slide, on the top left, you can see the hash rate distribution, and the top three miners there, CoinGeek, SV Pool, and BMG, basically didn't go along with the upgrade that everyone else had planned. They had said that they weren't going to follow it. So that created a lot of uncertainty. Then, as you see, right before the actual timing that this upgrade was supposed to happen, Bitcoin.com pool, which I don't know if you can see it, but it's a small yellow sliver on the top left graph, suddenly had 4,000 extra petahashes showed up. And then, as you can see on the bottom left, that's just a graph of the hash rate on the network, which starts out as one thing, and then it's split into two. You can see that it splits into two lines, and so it was a kind of a really unusual thing to have happen. This isn't what happens every day. And then at the end, you can see there's two pie charts because the network split into two. And just to kind of give a sense of the scale of this, 4,000 or 4 exahashes, 4,000 petahashes, that's equivalent to about 300,000 S9s. The amount of power is, the same as the Hoover Dam average output. And it's that mining facility that has a picture in the bottom is 25,000 S9s in there. So it's roughly 12 of those facilities. Like, so that's a lot of it's a lot of stuff. And if you look at the amount of hash power that was used versus the price, something like about more than $1 million, around $1 to $2 million of hash power was spent unprofitably in this period. So I guess this is just to say, hey, this is kind of a really weird thing. Why did this happen? And then following on from that, you can see it was a bit more. It seems like it had repercussions beyond just Bitcoin Cash. If you look at the Bitcoin price, both of those charts, I guess the top chart is Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin, so that took a huge hit. It's now about 50% of what it was when this, back in November. But also the Bitcoin USD price, you can see it took a huge drop around that time also in the whole crypto market. So, it's not necessarily, who knows whether that's a causal factor or not, but it seems like it may have been the timing seems to indicate that it definitely didn't help anyway, and maybe it triggered a furthering of the bear market. And as you can see on the right, Bitcoin Cash, which had been, a pretty solid fourth largest crypto for most of the last year, now it's dropped down to around sixth. It's gone down quite a bit. And Bitcoin SV, which is the offshoot from Bitcoin Cash, is now down to 12th. So it hasn't been great for either of those two cryptos. Okay, to kind of explain what actually happened, I'm going to have to back up a bit and kind of give the background to this whole story. Because if you just look at it, like I said before, if you just look at it from the outside and say, okay, they were planning to do a network upgrade, then all this crazy stuff happened, it seems totally irrational. Like, why would that even take place, destroying all this value? So basically, there's a long history to this, to Bitcoin Cash. It's born out of Bitcoin, and it was an ongoing, multi-year, essentially, debate within the community of what the best way forward is. There's many aspects to it. I'll just touch on a few to kind of give a flavor of it. But there were many attempts to increase the block size, to have more scaling. Basically, the whole debate is about how to handle scaling of Bitcoin so that it can grow larger. And this debate kind of came to a head in August of 2017 when Bitcoin Cash split off. Then that essentially kind of resolved this debate. So just to cover, it's very complicated, and you can spend a lot of time like delving into all the debates and issues around this. It's on many levels, like there's technical differences of opinion and just basic philosophical differences of how things should be organized. So basically, to simplify it, there's the small blocker and the big blocker side. The small blocker wanted essentially no changes to the base layer of Bitcoin, and to have scaling take place on a second layer. I'm sure everyone's heard of the Lightning Network. That's kind of their plan for how to scale things. So the idea is that, Bitcoin itself has 1 megabyte blocks, and then to allow that's not a lot of transactions. That only allows something like 5 transactions per second globally. So the idea is like, okay, then we'll build additional layers on top of it that facilitate people being able to, you do lots of transactions. And maybe this is my opinion, but the small blocker side focuses a lot on technical issues of scaling and why you want to keep the blocks small. And then the big blocker side, which is where the Bitcoin Cash system evolved out of, essentially their idea is like, okay, we're not going to freeze the base layer. We want to try to improve the base layer and scale it, make it more scaled. So scale on chain, and not necessarily have anything against building second layers on top of it, but not focus exclusively on that. So it's more of a focus on the base layer, but allow second layers if it's wanted. And I guess also the other thing is not just to also consider the economic aspects, not just the technical issues. So, and then this is kind of a summary that I thought from the mining perspective. Like if you're thinking long term about your revenue, in the long run, the block reward will go down. It halves every 4 years. So one of the small blocker side arguments is, okay, we need to create a fee market, so we need to have restricted capacity so we can have high enough fees to support the miners. So that's essentially a high margin, low volume plan. So they want to have the cost per transaction be, significant, like something significant, like people throw around different numbers, like $100 per transaction or something. Who knows what it would be. Whereas the small blocker argument has always been, no, that makes no sense economically. If you want to grow revenue, you need high volume, low margin. So I kind of, is my example here is just, it's like, do you want to be Amazon or Louis Vuitton? So I think for people who are into mining, like it's more of a long-term idea, but if you want a sustainable long-term business, that's, you have to think about which of these models makes the most sense. Okay, so I mentioned that Bitcoin Cash is more into focusing on making improvements to the base layer so that it can scale. So this is essentially, there's a roadmap of various things, and you can see some of them have green check marks. So those have already been done since Bitcoin Cash was created. No, my slides keep disappearing here. So the point is that there's a technical roadmap. There's 3 basic prongs to it. Scaling is on the left. I can't see what I'm doing. Oh yeah, usability. So things to make it more user friendly, and then extensibility. So because of this, and these are ongoing. So there's a lot of work going on. It's nothing like, a lot of these in a technical sense aren't that complicated. It's just a matter of when you have a decentralized network, you can't just wildly change things. So it's just a step-by-step process. There's a roadmap to it. It's public, and it's like a continuing process of improvement. So, and just to give some more context, these upgrades, there have been multiple upgrades so far. The first one, August 2017, was a change where that's what actually created Bitcoin Cash from Bitcoin. So the block size limit was changed to 8 megabytes. So that's an immediate. The Bitcoin block size is 1 megabyte, so it's an 8 times increase. And it had a change to how transactions are signed, which essentially has a bunch of improvements, but the main effect is that it became incompatible with Bitcoin transactions. So the 2 networks are separate. So if you have a wallet or whatever from before the fork, it splits into 2 essentially. So you can transact in Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, and you won't accidentally have replay. Anyway, if someone has questions about that, maybe I'll explain more details. But so then there was another upgrade in November 2017 to improve the difficulty adjustment algorithm, so it adjusts more smoothly. So that's pretty relevant for mining. That's a difference from Bitcoin also. So it adjusts every block. The difficulty adjusts. So which is kind of necessary when you're in a minority sharing the same algorithm as another coin. There was a scheduled upgrade in May 2018, which had a bunch more changes, just added some more functions and raised the block size limit again. And then the November 2018, which was a scheduled upgrade, but resulted in this crazy hash war. So that's what I'll talk about a bit more. And then there's another upcoming upgrade in May 2019, which is essentially already completely locked in and implemented. So that's hopefully going to just be a smooth upgrade that no one will notice. So anyway, so as you see, the November 15th one there had this interesting event happen. So I'll just give an overview of what actually happened. So leading up to the hash war, this is just the purpose of showing this is just to explain what the strategy seemed to be from these people. So Calvin Ayre and Craig were mining and involved in Bitcoin Cash and said they were not going to follow the upgrade. So you can see they say things like, winning will now be defined by who can take long-term pain in protection of your values. So they're basically saying, like, if you guys don't follow what we want, it will be bad for you. And they're essentially it's like if things don't go how we want, it will cause a lot of disruption and pain for everyone. So another example is right before the hash war. I showed this graph earlier where you can see that CoinGeek, SV Pool, and BMG Pool were the majority of the network. But the interesting thing is if you look at the profitability of mining Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, since they share the same algorithm, they're both SHA-256. So if you have your S9s or whatever, you can choose to mine one or the other. And most miners will just choose whichever one's most profitable at that time. So, but at this time, you can see it was 50% more profitable to mine on the Bitcoin chain. So it's kind of weird in just a purely rational economic sense. Why would they be mining Bitcoin Cash if it's so much more profitable to mine Bitcoin? So this is all part of essentially their strategy. It seemed like, and I'm just observing this, so I mean this is my interpretation of what's going on. It seemed like they were pursuing a commitment strategy, and essentially it's like an attrition strategy. So they're doing things that cost themselves a lot of money. So with the mining, when you mine unprofitably like that, it pushed everyone else out of the network, because all the other miners who are profit seeking would just say, well, we're not going to mine on Bitcoin Cash. So then they essentially pushed everyone else out. It seemed like they wanted to control the ecosystem and basically have their way. So the kind of theory that what they were trying to do, it seemed like, was to use their hash power to essentially lead the market or dictate how things go. So that's also like an interesting, from the perspective of mining, is that it's an interesting concept of the theory of what mining is or how it works. Like, do miners lead the market or do they follow the market? So in order to handle this situation, basically the idea was you don't want to get in an attrition war. It's usually not a good idea because both sides lose. It's essentially the way attrition wars work. If you read up on strategy, whoever loses the most, they just continue on until one person depletes all their resources. It's like the First World War. It's a horrible thing, and both sides, you don't really win it. Like, you just don't lose. So the idea is, like, you don't want to play that game if you can avoid it. What the Bitcoin Cash side had to do was essentially try to keep the market functional. So you don't want to have people create disruption. Like, if they're trying to create as much pain as possible by disrupting the market, you want to try to keep the market open, not have all the exchanges became very nervous because of all the threats of attacks and reorging the chain and stuff like that. So you want to basically keep the network stable and keep commerce flowing as much as possible. So that's what I said there. And then they also deployed, and the Bitcoin Cash side also added hash power to try to avoid disruption and just stay ahead of this game. So I'll just kind of quickly go over what actually happened, so you can see that this graph is just, disappeared again. It's just the hash rate on either network. So the top line, the yellow line, is the Bitcoin Cash hash rate, and the red line is BSV hash rate. So you can see the Bitcoin Cash added a bunch. It went up to, I think, something like 9 exahashes at the peak, and it fluctuated around. It was basically unprofitable for both of those chains for several days, maybe up to close to a week. But if you look at the bottom, you can see that basically the Bitcoin Cash mining profitability has stabilized to be close to Bitcoin. So right at the time I took the snapshot, this was last week. So it's basically at parity. I think it was actually 2% more profitable to mine on Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. But Bitcoin SV has stayed unprofitable. So that's an interesting thing to see. Like they are still mining essentially at a comparative loss for months and months and months. Okay, hopefully I can read my slide from over here. This is my, okay, it reappeared. This is my lessons learned, and this is kind of the end of my talk. So I'll just go through these, and maybe I'll just go through these quickly, and if people have more questions, I can try to answer them more. One of the things that I think came out of this that may be an interesting opportunity from the mining perspective is that a lot of businesses that base their entire business model on a blockchain or on a cryptocurrency didn't have any mining, and this turned out to be a problem for them because it leaves them vulnerable to the people who have mining, who want something different. So, for example, like Coinbase, BitPay, companies like that, or even any company like Bitcoin.com had some mining power, so that was good for them. But I think one of the lessons out of this is that it's important for businesses to invest in the infrastructure that they're building on top of, and that applies to development also. So from my perspective as a developer, that's an important thing for them to do. But that may be like a thing for miners to think about as a future market opportunity. Yeah, I mean, one of the things leading up to the hash war was a lot of debate about will there be a split or not a split, and if we have more hash power, we'll force there to not be a split, and it was kind of a big ongoing argument, but I think what happened showed that, yeah, if you have two incompatible software systems, there will be a split no matter what. It's just a matter of which one is larger than the other. So, yeah, I mean, BCH, Bitcoin Cash survived and kind of won the hash war, but the combined value of the split of the two coins now is less than it was before. So, to put that in context, like when Bitcoin Cash split from Bitcoin, or Ethereum Classic and Ethereum split, in both of those cases there was value added. If you look at the value of the two coins after, it was actually higher. So it's interesting to try to think about why there's a difference there. So I think basically if there's two different value propositions, like with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, there's two different ideas, and you're trying two things that are actually different. So it makes sense to have both experiments going. So I think that adds value to the market. In this case, essentially vying for dominance over one market it seems like there's no benefit to that. So it basically was not good value-wise for the market. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin Cash, from my perspective, it was essentially a hostile takeover. So it showed that Bitcoin Cash can defend itself from that. And yeah, I guess in terms of from the Bitcoin Cash perspective, it's a good time to just rebuild, and things look pretty good for the future. And I think that's my talk. So yeah, thank you. And I'll take questions if anyone has them.
Yes. Keep it going for Antony Zegers. Yes. It usually takes a second. They think for a second, and then they have a million. Any questions for Antony?
Well, it was a bit of a different topic from the mining stuff, so I'll be around if anyone thinks of something later. Feel free to come up to me.
We have a question right over there.
Yeah, why does Bitcoin Cash believe in increasing block size when IBM has actually done development on it and proved that it's not a scalable solution? I've always wondered that.
Well, I don't know what you're referring to, but I don't know what you're referring to. I mean, I don't think that's true. Like, I don't know what you mean. Sorry. I mean, it's obvious that just increasing the capacity of something will add to the capacity. I don't.
Not necessarily scalability and else.
Well, it depends how you define the term scalability. I mean, to give a more nuanced answer, like a lot of the arguments for keeping block sizes, a lot of the technical arguments for why you shouldn't increase block size have some truth to them, I'd say. So they're qualitatively correct in some way, but a lot of those reasons don't apply to a lot larger sizes. So maybe like there are a few things that that's why I showed that technical roadmap. Like, you have to fix a few things to allow the scaling beyond certain sizes, but it's not like a fundamental issue. But yeah, you get into lots of technical weeds once you look into all that stuff. Thanks.
Those are great. He has another question right over there. Sure.
Do you believe that the House proposal decided, like, did you believe that was consensus is still way, or
I mean, I think that's kind of part of what this whole argument was about. It depends. Like, a lot of miners don't. I mean, essentially, at the end of the day, I think it's the market decides. So you want to listen to what the market wants and try to do that. Essentially, I guess that would be my short answer. But the specifics of how you do that is not totally obvious. So I think a lot of miners, there's a lot of people who have miner voting ideas, like the miners will vote on it, but there's issues with that also. Like, a lot of miners I think most miners want to follow the market, so that just defers the problem to them. So I feel like it doesn't really solve the problem. It just kind of puts it in a different place. So does that answer the question, kind of? Okay, thanks.
I think there's a question right back there.
I don't think that really, I mean, that's just a word. I don't think it really matters. I mean, I think... Well, the big difference is that the state of the ledger at the time of the fork, like they share the same history up until the split happened. So anyone holding Bitcoin at the time that Bitcoin Cash was created now has holdings in both. So from the perspective of the market, like most altcoins, you have to make a conscious decision to go and buy them. So this way, it basically gives you, if you're thinking of it as an investment, you basically have two, and you're betting on one thing, and now you have two options. So I think that, I mean, personally, that seems like a way better way to do things. If you're going to try two experiments for how this should scale, as an investor, now you have your eggs in both baskets, basically. So, I mean, whether you call it Bitcoin or an altcoin or whatever, I don't have a strong opinion about that personally, but Well, I don't know. I mean, in the case of this hash war, it seems like there wasn't a large. It seems like it turned out that there wasn't a large, like, technical reason for it. So, yeah, no problem.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Antony Zegers.